Hello and welcome to the first talk. I'm Ian, one of the organisers, and when I'm not doing this, I also work in advocacy and consultancy. We're going to start today, as we always do, with a news update, a quick highlights reel of some of the wins that our community in general has seen over the past 6 months since the last edition of the conference. Even though it's just a highlights reel, it was a really packed 6 months, so there's still going to be a lot to get across, and it'll be coming over quickly. But don't feel like you need to keep notes or look things up. At the end, I'll give you a document that will include links to everything that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to cover 6 topics: assistive tech, resources for players and for developers, events, games, and people. So, starting with AT. Last time the news was all about PlayStation's Access controller. This time Xbox are taking a turn, and boy have they been busy. First, with updates to the Xbox Adaptive Controller. The first update upgrading the type of regular controllers that can be attached. So it now allows 12 controller buttons to be recognised instead of 8, second stick and a hat switch, and all of that is per USB. And another update to allow toggle holds, otherwise known as latching, for both the Adaptive Controller and the Elite. They also announced the Xbox Adaptive Joystick, which is compatible with the Xbox Adaptive Controller, but also through the newly renamed Controller Assist, formerly called Copilot, which is a system-level feature that lets you duplicate controls across multiple controllers. And also the Adaptive Joystick is just usable on its own. It is a greatly simplified one-handed device, similar to a single Joy-Con on the Switch, with just a single stick and 6 buttons. It hits the shelves next year, but if you want an early preview, then speak to Caitlin Jones of Xbox. The controller is her baby, and she is at the in-person event today. They also launched the Adaptive Thumbstick Toppers service, which is an online tool based around a selection of alternative stick designs that work with all flavors of Xbox controller. They have customizable parameters for height and width, and it outputs files that can then be downloaded for free, either to 3D print yourself or to send to a third-party 3D printing service. Also, pre-orders opened for the Proteus, which is a completely modular controller kit developed by a company called BioWave, but also working in partnership with the Design for Xbox team. The Xbox 8 Lite SE controller was simultaneously announced and released. It's a small controller designed specifically for accessibility, usable while flat on the tabletop. It's been around for a while for the Switch, but now comes in Xbox flavor. And unique to the Xbox version are 2 large button switches out of the box. And even including these 2 new switches, it still retails for $59, which is a very small cost compared to most accessibility controllers. Stepping away from Xbox and their affiliates just for a moment, the U-Magic controller was announced. This was built in partnership between Bolha and Able Gamers Brazil. It's a large metal base with a layout on top that is completely configurable through magnetized panels on the bottom of the inputs. There have been a couple of interesting AT advances outside of controllers too, like iOS 18 adding eye tracking through the front-facing camera, vocal shortcuts, and also a feature that lets the whole screen be controlled from a small region through a resizable virtual trackpad. And lastly, Audio Radar, which transforms in-game audio into directional light signals displayed through LED bars that attach to the sides of your screen. Next, we've got resources, starting with resources for players. And for that, we are jumping straight back into Xbox again. Xbox released a whole bunch of new support articles categorized by disability. These are primarily guides for how to use system-level accessibility functionality. Twitch finally answered calls for years to do something about discoverability of disabled creators. So they're creating a collection of disabled streamers and adding a section to the Twitch homepage to feature collections. That's going to be on rotation between disabled, indigenous, and military and veteran creators. The Para Racers Academy launched. This is a program run by Quatermass Motorsport in the UK, aimed at getting more disabled people into simulation racing, aiming to empower drivers with physical and psychological disabilities to compete at the highest levels, already with a team of 10 drivers aiming to compete at events like the Virtual Le Mans through training and support, and also the development and provision of custom sim racing hardware and software. And as always, a critical resource for players is information about games. Atomfall was announced in June as part of the Xbox Showcase event, and they joined Magical Delicacy and Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown in being one of the 3 games so far that have published accessibility information not only in advance of launching, but actually announced on the very day the game was announced. This is incredibly valuable. Any information at all that you're in a position to give early on means more players are able to get excited about your game, knowing that they'll actually be able to play it. And of course, developers themselves aren't the only place that players look to for information about accessibility. Content creators play a huge role in this, and Star Wars Outlaws went all in ensuring that the early preview round included sending builds out to large numbers of disabled creators and across regions all around the world too. And one last note on getting word out to players. The voting process kicks off soon for the GAconf Awards, with the ceremony being broadcast in the middle of January. There are a couple of ad breaks in it, used to showcase upcoming or recent accessibility goodness. So if you've got something in the works that would be a good fit for that, anything from a game trailer to an overview of an initiative, then please get in touch. And so with that, moving on to developer resources. First of all, we've had a few nice sources of data. One is from King. Research they did a while back now is in the public domain. It's covering 40,000 players across Candy Crush Saga and Candy Crush Soda. And they found that 38% of their players were reporting some kind of disability. That might sound like quite a staggering number, but it's actually in line with what you would expect. There's data from Newzoo, which consistently reports 30% of players in the USA and the UK, and that's across all age groups, whereas Candy Crush games have a slightly older demographic. Most of their players are over 40. So actually that 38% then isn't too surprising. They have a whole bunch of other nice data too, including these gems showing disabled players playing for 5 to 9% more than average, and also spending 12 to 19% more than average. I definitely recommend having a look through it all. It's all in the presentation that they gave at GAconf. Again, there'll be a link in the doc at the end. Still on the topic of compelling data, hot off the press, Call of Duty Black Ops 6 posted a nice piece just a couple of days ago about features in the game, and they've again shared some data in that post. This time it's that nearly half of their players are accessing the accessibility settings menu. Rebellion shared a range of data from across their portfolio for Global Accessibility Awareness Day back in May. Here's a few data points from Sniper Elite 5. 96% of players played with dialogue subtitles on. That's completely consistent with other games that we've seen. 35% of players increased the text size, and 97% used aim assist. And they also shared data for a couple of other games too, Evil Genius and Zombie Army 4. Sticking with Rebellion again, they've published an accessibility test brief as a free online resource. It's a template and format for creating an accessibility evaluation of part of a game, highlighting successes and barriers, their impact, and suggested solutions, making use of guidelines and examples from other games to support it. The goal is to give people interested in the topic a bit of experience and some portfolio material, all aimed at helping them to move into accessibility as a specialism. Xbox have also published a free developer resource, the Game Accessibility Workshop Toolkits. Player workshops are a method that has proven success. We've had multiple talks about them at the conference before. Xbox have done loads of them, and they've now shared materials to help others do the same. It covers guidance on what to consider when setting up in the Game Accessibility Workshop, visual assets to use in conducting the workshop, and also an introductory 101 video that can be used to introduce participants to the topic. There have been some new guidelines too, actually both of them for accessibility in VR games. The first one is from Ultraleap, focused on motor accessibility with lots of nice videos on do's and don'ts. And also Road to VR published one on a slightly different angle, a checklist and glossary for simulation sickness comfort. And we have two new books. The first is Ability Machines by researcher Skylar Rell Anderson, and the other is Game Accessibility Concepts and Examples by South Korean publisher Smilegate. And to finish up this section, we have quite a different resource. It's a legal reference about a very important case. What this is about is return to office mandates, which have been a big topic across the industry in the past year. Companies forcing all of their employees out of work from home arrangements into office environments thanks to C-suite directives, despite the mountains of research showing the harm that it causes. But as Cloud Imperium Games, who are the developers of Star Citizen, found out, it turns out that if you are doing this to an employee who needs to work from home for accessibility reasons, then in the UK at least, forcing them into the office is illegal. One of their senior developers was disabled. He was in the office pre-COVID, but lockdown showed how much better from working from home suited his needs. The company then implemented a return to office mandate. He requested working from home permanently on the grounds of his disability. They denied this request and instead they fired him. He took this to an employment tribunal, which is the UK's mechanism for ruling on and enforcing laws around workers' rights. They ruled that working from home was a reasonable adjustment. Therefore, failing to provide it was a breach of the UK's disability laws, and they made the company pay him substantial compensation. That ruling, that working from home classed as a reasonable adjustment, is huge. All UK employers are legally required to make reasonable adjustments to meet disabled employees' needs. So this case is a landmark one that both staff and employers, not just in games but across all industries, need to be aware of. So on quite a different note, there have been quite a few nice things happening with events. The usual leaders in this space, like Ubisoft and Xbox, have been not just maintaining but building upon their past work. Like Forward's move to live, meaning live audio description and captioning too. and the Xbox Showcase adding things like Service Animal Relief Area. Their work on this extends to their presence at third-party events too, like Gamescom, with a particular highlight being staff who are trained in audio description available to take guests around the Xbox booth and describe the various experiences, including game demos. And they've been joined by more too, events like Gamescom and TennoCon upping their accessibility games with things like ASL and captions, and also Able Gamers Brazil's presence at Gamescom LATAM, bringing things like a quiet room and audio description for their stands. EGX in the UK had something fun too. As well as the addition of a quiet room and British Sign Language for a number of their talks and panels, they included a new BSL filter into their schedule page so people can easily find which sessions will be accessible to them. And some absolutely massive news too. I've already mentioned Gamescom, but actually they went further than the things they were implementing themselves. They also implemented standards and guidelines for exhibitors. So now, the biggest games trade show in the world has made wheelchair access to booths mandatory for every single exhibitor, together with a bunch of other optional accessibility recommendations too, from further wheelchair advice through to non-split flooring, sensory aids, staff training, lighting, and sign language. This top-down approach from events to exhibitors is something that, frankly, everyone needs to follow Gamescom's lead on. I mean, not just giving people rules, but the support and the advice that goes along with that too. And there have also been some nice moves in events that are specifically for and about accessibility. The first is the Adaptive Gaming Camp from Makers Making Change, aimed at enabling young disabled people in Canada to learn about and explore adaptive gaming in a supportive environment, competing and coming away with access to technology too. The Top of the Landing tournament kicked off, which is a tournament specifically for players with motor disabilities. This is founded by Mike Luckett, who I'm sure many of you know, possibly under his name of Mike the Quad. Similarly, Cento Showdown is a tournament specifically for blind players that has run for a number of years now. The fact that it's running for another year isn't big news in itself, but this time they went all out on the promotion with a slick, fully audio described trailer with narration by none other than Vic Chow, who is the voice actor for Kenshi, the blind fighter in Mortal Kombat. And there have been some nice events for industry folk too. Firstly, an academic one, the Game Accessibility Research Summit as part of the 23rd International Conference on Entertainment Computing in Brazil. The Game Accessibility Gathering, run by Carrie Waterton of Rebellion and Joseph Kulik of Splash Damage. This was a fringe event of the Develop Conference in the UK, with panels and lightning talks. And also Nothing Without Us, run by Molly Evans, also known as Little Motuck. This started out as an online event for Disability Pride, but this year actually split off into an additional in-person event in London. So together with the UK edition of GAconf, that means the UK now has 3 dedicated game accessibility conferences, an actual community of events. To have 3 in a single country is pretty staggering compared to where things were really not very many years ago. The next topic is what pretty much everything so far has ultimately been about, which is the games themselves. I'm going to give you a lot of names now, not so much individual detail on each one, but a ton of great stuff for you to explore later at your own leisure. So again, a reminder that you don't need to take notes for that. It's all listed and linked to in that document that I'll give you at the end. So first up, AAAs. Unlike what we had the past couple of years, we're actually still yet to see any new AAA in 2024 that is fully blind accessible. But there has still been a load of great work being done at this end of the industry. Games like Star Wars Outlaws, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Hellblade 2, Stellar Blade, X Defiant, Multiverses. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a bit. Multiverses, F124, Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble, Homeworld 3, Harry Potter Quidditch Champions, Casting Frank Stone, Astrobot, FC24, Just Dance 25, and Throne and Liberty. High contrast modes have continued their march, present in 3 of the games on the screen now, Outlaws, Black Ops 6 and Stellar Blade. There's also been some lovely innovation too, from Hellblade 2's highly scalable combat mechanics to Outlaws, cognitive preset and blind accessible open world map screens, all the way to Black Ops 6's asymmetrical hearing compensation and intelligent movement system. Games from smaller studios have been no slouch either, with some highlights including The Plucky Squire, Periphery Synthetic, Another Crab's Treasure, Tales of Kenzera Zao, Sandlands, Grapple Dogs Cosmic Canines, Magical Delicacy, Crit Master, Horror Tales the Beggar, Ever After Falls, Click Holding, Skim, SteamWorld Heist 2, One Button Bosses, Elsie, Stack and the Grumble Puff from Above, and honestly so many more. This barely scratches the surface, so I've listed a whole bunch of others in the document as well. And there's all kinds of goodness amongst this lot, from audio games to voice control mechanics, simplified English mode, puzzle helpers, RTS micromanagement automation, boss rush gameplay through a single button, and even giving a crab a gun. Existing games have continued to improve through patches and mods too. A few highlights include Diablo 4's new nav assist for blind players, and Balatro being modded for full blind accessibility. Walkabout Minigolf's Magnifier, Rainbow Six Siege's wheelchair easing operator, World of Warcraft's Arachnophobia mode, and a swathe of other updates across games like Star Wars Outlaws, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Dead Cells, Alan Wake 2, Nerea, State of Decay 2, and Tales of Kenzera Zao. And far, far older games are being made accessible to far more people too, with remakes and remasters bringing sweeping accessibility upgrades to games like Doom 1 and 2, Baten Kaitos 1 and 2, Sam & Max The Devil's Playhouse, Age of Mythology, Silent Hill 2, Until Dawn, and also Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection, which brings Street Fighter 6 style accessibility to a whole bunch of old arcade classics. And onto the last section now, the people, without whom none of this would be possible. There are actually still a couple of recent vacancies being filled at the moment, and a new one that's due to be advertised this week for a Europe-based role. That is a senior accessibility lead over at Scopely. So if you're interested, keep an eye on that coming up. But we do also have some people who have recently started in dedicated accessibility roles. So I'm going to close out this talk by giving them a heartfelt welcome to the professional game accessibility community. And those people are Holly Westcott, Accessibility Lead at Amazon Games, Brock Davis, Accessibility Test Analyst on Diablo 4, and Corrine Kimball and Roosevelt Armstead, both Accessibility Quality Engineers at Xbox. So on that note, all that's left is for me to finally share that link dump document that I've been threatening you with throughout, which contains everything from this talk plus some more things too. And you can find that at tinyurl.com, GAconf Oct24. I hope there's been something amongst this that you found useful or interesting or even inspiring, and that this has helped to add fuel to the fire to keep your motivation topped up until the next event. So thanks for listening. Thanks for putting up with me losing my voice. I hope you enjoy the conference, and see you next time.